Now, I'm sure you're all wondering how many pea pads we've actually sold throughout this season. Well, I'm gonna share that with you right now. Imagine a blueprint, a step-by-step guide, a case study where we peel back the curtains and show you what it takes to sell on Amazon. Welcome to the $1 Million Case Study. So what does it take to sell on Amazon? Although there are many factors that lead to success, I believe that having the right mindset is what gets you through in the end. To survive on Amazon, you must shift your thinking away from short-term gain to long-term investment and sustainability. One thing I can't stress enough is to try and avoid getting bogged down in the day-to-day. Especially in the beginning, if you aren't selling as much as you thought you would, just remember, you're building something important here, a future for yourself. The best way of getting into this mindset is to set long-term goals for your business. Think 1, 3, and even 5-year goals that you'd like to hit. And at the end of the day, just remember that your business is only part of your life, not your entire life. Keep in mind that just like investing into your business, you should take the time to invest in yourself as well. Now today I'm going to recap the story so far. I think it's valuable for you to see the timeline of what it's looked like for me to find, source, ship, and launch this product so that you can get an idea of what that timeline may look like for you. Of course, this timeline is going to be different for everyone. Keep in mind that Kerry and myself have launched other products on Amazon before, so having that experience certainly helped us move a bit faster throughout the product research stage and the rest of the process. So let's start from the very beginning. The first step in starting any business, of course, is figuring out what to sell. This is where product research comes in. We did some short demonstrations with you in the earlier episodes where we used Jungle Scout's product database and the opportunity finder tools to narrow down our list of potential products to sell. But then outside of that, each of us did about 2 hours of additional product research per week on our own, as well as meeting together on Zoom calls for an 1.5 hour call each week over about an 8-week period. We were doing this alongside all of our other responsibilities here at Jungle Scout, so that might actually be very similar to a lot of you out there who might be doing this alongside a full-time job or study or parenting. If we didn't have those commitments, then of course that time frame could have been compressed a lot more than just 8 weeks. So keep that in mind. In total for us, the product research phase took roughly 25 hours overall to complete over that 8-week period. And just know that there's no minimum or maximum time needed to find which product you're going to sell, as long as you've compiled strong enough data to support your final decision. Now, as you may remember, we had a list of about 6 to 7 top products. For our top 2 favorite potential products, the dog bowls and the puppy pea pads, we then went on Alibaba to contact potential suppliers to collect quotes and then samples. Overall, this process took about a month or so to complete, including the time it took us to receive and then test out the samples once they arrived. Keep in mind that this time period overlapped with our product research as we were ordering samples for our first favorite product, which was actually the dog bowls, quite early on, yet we still continued with the product research in the background. So those stages blended together a little bit. We only had a couple of ideas when we first ordered those samples, and that's not necessarily something that I'd recommend for everyone. If you're starting out, you'd be better off getting that list to at least 4 or 5 ideas first, and then ordering samples of your top products from there. However, we were trying to fast track the process, and we felt pretty confident about the bowls at the time. That being said, if you remember, that product didn't end up working out. We discovered that our particular bowl did have a patent on it by Yeti that I admit we overlooked at the time, as we didn't consider that a bowl design could be patented. Fortunately though, we'd also ordered samples of our second favorite product, which was the washable pea pads, and so that ended up being the winner. And that's a good note to make here that in hindsight, we spent a good number of hours on the dog bowls, talking about how to differentiate them, reaching out to suppliers, going back and forth, messaging them late at night, as that was early morning in China. Then finally, that product didn't work out. And that's just part of the process. You'll go down certain rabbit holes that may not end up being your final product, but you need to go through that process in order to get to that final product.
Yeah, I would love to kind of hear, I guess, some of your personal challenges along the way. I'm sure there's probably been lots of them.
So one of my first challenges was just growing too fast. And I think sometimes when we start this business, we don't even realize the potential of it, and it can start to grow massively. And my struggle was the customer support. So I didn't have a good customer support system in place. I just hired one freelancer off of Upwork. And the problem with that is that now the response time for my customers was not adequate. Like it took 2-3 days for a response, which it shouldn't be. So I think for me, what I should have done is I should have figured out my customer support, what I was going to do about that, and had a system in place so that as my business grew, it was able to support that growth. One other thing was I had way too many SKUs. So I had over 600 different SKUs, and I thought, the more the better, the more patterns and colors and the more variations, the better, because that gives people more options. But that's not necessarily the case. And so what I didn't do was look at the data. I didn't look at the reports to see, okay, what's the 80-20 rule here? What are 20% of the products that are pulling in 80% of the profits? I ended up having hundreds of thousands of dollars in dead stock. So I think, so making sure that you don't necessarily branch out too fast, thinking that the more the better. Sometimes less is more, and there's a lot of truth to that. And then the last thing is bookkeeping. If you guys are starting a new business, make sure you have clean books, good books.
The next step of the process was then to get our final product shipped from the manufacturer in China all the way to an Amazon fulfillment center in the US. However, at the time, during the pandemic, Amazon was only allowing new listings to hold up to 200 units of inventory in total. So we ultimately decided to have our order of 500 units shipped to the Jungle Scout headquarters, where we could then send in 200 units at a time until those sold out. If it wasn't for the 200 unit limit, I am personally a fan of just sending all the inventory straight into Amazon and essentially not having to double handle it. The final amount for the 504 units was $3,805 plus $1,300 for shipping, where we decided to save on costs by choosing ocean shipping rather than air. However, this option did take a bit more time for the product to arrive. This was also using DDP terms, which stands for Delivered Duty Paid. So where FOB terms means that the buyer, or you, bears all the responsibility and costs for getting the product to the destination, DDP means that the seller, or your supplier, takes on these costs and responsibility. So this quote will likely be a little more expensive than FOB. However, you then don't have to worry about customs or any additional costs. Those should all be covered in that initial payment. And so I made the final payment on the 21st of December, 2020, and then the shipment arrived in Austin on January 27th, 2021. So the shipping time was approximately 5 weeks, which is actually pretty reasonable for ocean shipping. Once the product arrived at Jungle Scout headquarters, we then needed to take some photos so that we could begin creating our first product listing on Amazon. I actually ended up using the iPhone photos that you might remember me taking. So this process didn't take too much time. I might have spent about 2 hours taking all the photos that I needed for the listing. Now, like I said, since we decided to send the inventory to the Jungle Scout headquarters, we then needed to set up a shipment order to get them to an Amazon fulfillment center. We used one of Amazon's discounted carriers, selected the SPD option as it was a smaller shipment overall, and then UPS Ground came to pick up and then deliver 200 of our units into Amazon. That shipping process only took 3 days to arrive at the Amazon warehouse, which was really nice and quick. After that, we then needed to create our Amazon listing. This process was actually really fun, but did take a bit of time to complete considering all the keyword research that went into it. For this, we used Jungle Scout's Keyword Scout tool to curate our list of the most relevant keywords for our product. And then to make sure those keywords were properly added to our listing, we then used the Listing Builder tool to add those keywords to our title, bullet points, and product description. Next, we made sure to upload our images we took earlier on, and finally published the listing. Overall, from start to finish, this step took about 4 hours to complete. A note that I want to make here is that I went through this process really quickly as I was keen just to get the listing live and really get it about 80% of the way so that I could get selling and then in the future come back and optimize it further. Later on, I'll talk about some of the improvements that I want to make, but just keep in mind that you could spend longer on this process. So then the product was in stock, the listing was live, and it was time to launch this product. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering how many pee pads we've actually sold throughout this season. Well, I'm gonna share that with you right now using Jungle Scout's Profit Overview tool. So you can see since we launched a little over a month ago, we've sold around 400 units total. That's almost $11,000 in sales in just our first month on Amazon. Now, keep in mind that we were running it at a lower price than our intended one of $29.99. Instead, we priced it at $24.99 and then offered an additional 20% off coupon, which brought it down to about $20, which was our break-even point. So we weren't necessarily as profitable in the beginning, but as you've heard me say before, this was intentional to help us build up initial sales velocity so that we could in turn get our first reviews and then eventually keep upping the price to a higher point. So let's dive into some insights. We're here inside of Sales Analytics. We're looking at the last 30 days, which is in fact the entire lifetime of this particular product or the sales that we've made. So the big number here I want to point out is the net margin, which is ultimately our profitability. You'll see that we're actually about negative 28% or negative $2,800. So we aren't profitable yet, but as I've mentioned before, this was part of the strategy. Next, I want to change the date range that we're looking at, and I'm going to change it to the last 14 days. And so now you're going to see a bit of a different story. Again, pointing out the net margin, you'll see that we're only about negative 8%. So what this means is that we're actually closing this gap. The last couple of weeks, we've become more and more profitable. Now we're only negative $400 in the past 2 weeks. And I think we're going to continue that trend where we're going to close that gap more and more over the next few weeks and couple of months, and then actually become profitable and recoup that initial investment we made into getting those initial sales and reviews. Now, if we scroll down, we can see this plotted on a graph here. You can start to see, it's not like a lot of data to look at, but you're starting to see that we're trending up as far as profit goes. We can click through and take a look at some of the other numbers here in terms of revenue. You'll see that again, this is also jumping up a little bit. It's dipped down at the moment as we're close to running out of our initial 500 units, but we've got more coming in. Now, we have also done a bit of advertising as well. So let's take a look at that. We're going to change the view back to the last 30 days and look at the entire time of our advertising. So you can see that we spent around $4,500 on sponsored product campaigns at a 76% ACOS. It's interesting to see how these campaigns are getting more and more profitable as time goes on without us actually optimizing them. We haven't done that just yet. You can see in the first few days here, as well as the last week or so, we've actually been making more sales than what we've been spending. And interestingly enough, within our first 2 days of advertising, that really big spike that you see there, we're actually able to successfully win the #1 spot for hot new releases for training pads on Amazon. And with only being available for sale for 1 month, we're now ranked 123 in dog training pads on Amazon. That's a pretty good start if you ask me. And again, all of this is happening without professional images or even A+ content. So there's certainly a lot more room to grow as we continue improving the listing and have more inventory to fulfill all these orders. Now, as we take the next steps to improve our listing, I'd like to get more professional images taken and added into the listing. In addition, having a video would be really great and should really help our overall conversion rate. We can then use that video and create a sponsored brand video ad, which I'm hearing are doing really well from other sellers. And so on that note, we want to continue optimizing our existing campaigns and work on driving down our ACOS closer towards our break-even point that we calculated in the last episode. Now, I want to stress that although we're not profitable right now, I'm confident that once we make some of these optimizations that I've just mentioned, we'll be able to grow our sales and become more profitable on Amazon. I do plan on making a follow-up episode in a few months from now to share with you all how we're tracking towards that goal. Again, we're really early in the process. We're still technically launching the product. So make sure you stick around and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so that you don't miss that follow-up episode.
Now, I'm curious, have any of the challenges, or did any of the challenges you've experienced along the way ever make you consider giving up?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, I've been on the phone with Amazon customer support, and I've spent 6 hours on the phone with them, just being passed from one person to the next person and then being hung up on. And there are times where I was just crying and just feeling like, you know what, this isn't worth it. I just want to go back to my normal job. I had many, many moments like that. But ultimately you realize that it's because I'm in that state. I went through, it was a stressful day. And yes, those things happen in business, but ultimately, look what this business is providing for me. Ultimately, all of it is worth it. You will overcome those challenges. And I think it's very important to get super clear about, okay, what is this going to provide for you in your life? Why do you want to achieve financial freedom? What does it mean for you, your family, what you can give to the world, how you can spend your time? Because when you create a vision that's so beautiful, so compelling, so attractive, then even in the midst of chaos and challenges, you're like, I will push through this. I will get through this because that's worth it. That vision I have for myself is worth it.
Also visit Jungle Scout if you'd like to see how our leading all-in-one platform can help you sell on Amazon. We have an array of tools from helping you find a product all the way to managing your business. For instance, try out Inventory Manager to help you make sure that you're always in stock once your shipment has arrived. If you'd like to see Jungle Scout in action, then check out the link in the description for a free live demo. Now, as we wrap up the final episode of the $1 Million Case Study, I want to leave you all with some practical advice as you go to launch your first product on Amazon. If you remember back to the first few episodes, during the product research stage, we realized that this particular category was actually quite competitive. There are a ton of big name brands with thousands of reviews that we're competing with every day for sales. And keep in mind that this was also in the middle of a global pandemic, as shipping times are slowed down and inventory is harder than ever to manage. For some people, that may have been enough to believe that selling on Amazon is an impossible task. But because we found a strong enough niche that was clearly in demand, and we were confident enough in our ability to make the product stand out, we went forward and did the one thing that a lot of entrepreneurs never do. That is to start. By actually starting, we took what was just an idea and turned it into a physical product that people can actually buy on Amazon. And with just over a month in, we're now ranked right outside the top 100 in the dog training pads category. So I hope now that you can clearly see it's not impossible to begin selling on Amazon, even during a global pandemic. If I did it, that means that you can too. So if you just take one piece of advice from this entire season, I hope it's that you just start right now and begin your journey as an Amazon seller. This doesn't like my voice anymore. All Cameras on, real talk, maybe. All right, so we'll cut there. Sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cut. Ooh, it's a wrap, I guess.